Hey everybody, so it's time for NHL Games of the Week, where I look at the upcoming week in the NHL and pick out which games I think will be the best and most exciting to watch. Before we get into it, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It greatly helps out and is very much appreciated. So there are a ton of great games this week looking at the schedule, particularly today, Sunday the 29th, New Year's Eve on Tuesday. Saturday there's just a ton of great games this week. So let's get right into it and get started. Starting with today, December 29th. A bunch of great games on the docket tonight. We have Winnipeg versus St. Louis in a massive divisional matchup in the Central Division between, two very good teams. Buffalo versus Boston, second half of a home and home between those two teams. Big 2 points on the line, especially for the Sabres, who are trying to keep up with Florida and Toronto and Tampa Bay and Montreal, the other teams fighting for playoff position in the Atlantic. Montreal versus Florida in a game with huge playoff implications in the Atlantic Division between two teams that usually play pretty fun and exciting games against each other. That's going to be a real big one. Montreal, the middle of that Atlantic Division, as I've talked about on this channel many times over the last couple weeks, is so tight. They're right on top of each other. Teams are moving up 2 or 3 spots or down 2 or 3 spots with every win or loss. It's really fun to watch and interesting, and between most of those teams are all playing very important games this week. Dallas versus Arizona in a important game for two very good teams out west who want to be securely in a playoff position. That's a big game between two good teams. And Vancouver versus Calgary, a massive 2 points on the line in the Pacific Division. Big time playoff spot implications on the line in that game. Vancouver out of the playoffs trying to move their way up. Calgary hanging on to a playoff spot, looking to keep it. So in the Pacific Division is very tight. A lot of teams stacked up on each other there as well. So big game there. Let's see, tomorrow the 30th, there's only one game, and it's nothing special, so we got none for that. Moving on to the 31st, New Year's Eve. We've got a number of great games on New Year's Eve in the NHL, starting with the New York Islanders versus the Washington Capitals. The two best teams in the Metropolitan Division go at it in what should be an extremely exciting and fun game to watch. That's going to be a real good one for sure. Tampa Bay versus Buffalo in a massive game with massive standings implications and playoff implications on it. Obviously, not like playoff implications as in when you're in or anything like that. There's still a lot of regular season left. But as far as who's in a playoff spot and who's not, this game between Tampa Bay and Buffalo is going to be absolutely massive. Toronto's been playing well recently. Tampa Bay's starting to pick it up a little bit. Florida's been winning. So Buffalo's starting to get pushed down a little bit, and they need to pick up some wins against divisional opponents if they're going to pull themselves back up. So that's a huge game for the Sabres and the Lightning. Winnipeg and Colorado, a massive Central Division matchup between two teams that very well could meet in the playoffs. Colorado, they're in second place right now. Winnipeg, bouncing between third place and that wild card spot, but nonetheless, they could very easily end up the 2-3 matchup in the Central this year. And anytime the Central Division teams play, it's usually really fun matchup and fun to watch. But when you get two good teams like the Jets and the Avalanche, it really takes it up to a whole other level. And lastly, for Tuesday, St. Louis versus Arizona. Just two of the top teams in the Western Conference. This is a big matchup for Arizona, I think. We want to see if Arizona really can play with the big boys of the league. And, how good are the Coyotes now? They went out and they got Taylor Hall. They added some offense to an already good team. And now it's, are they a contender? Are they a real contender? Well, if you're going to be a contender, you're going to have to go through teams like St. Louis. So this is a big game for the Coyotes to see how they look against a top tier opponent. Moving on to New Year's Day, there's only one game in the NHL on New Year's Day. It's the Winter Classic, as always. Nashville versus Dallas, 100% a game of the week. Outdoor game, Central Division matchup. Two teams that really, really need the points. That's going to be an outstanding game, and 100% worth the watch, without a doubt. Let's see, the second, we have Thursday the 2nd, we have Columbus versus Boston. They met in the playoffs in the second round last year. This is their first time meeting this season. Should be a fun matchup. I'm interested to see, Columbus isn't all that great this year, but I'm interested to see if there's any, carryover intensity from the playoff series last year. And I just think that's going to be a fun game to watch. Tampa Bay versus Montreal, similar to the Tampa Bay versus Buffalo game. Just huge points on the line. Big-time standings implications. All these teams in that Atlantic Division, with the exception of Boston at the top and Ottawa and Detroit, who are out of it at the bottom, all those teams sitting in the middle, they desperately need as many points as they can get because they're stacked on top of each other. It's a huge playoff race going on. It's like 2 out of the 5 teams are going to make the playoffs. 3 aren't. So every time that any of those teams meet up, it's a massive game and big-time points on the line. And St. Louis versus Colorado in a massive Central Division showdown. The top 2 teams in the Central facing off Thursday night. That should be an outstanding game and a potential look ahead to a playoff matchup. We know how good St. Louis has been this season, one of the top teams in the league. Colorado, without having the injuries that they've had, probably would be right there with St. Louis. They're trailing behind a little bit, but I think it's just because they've had so many major injuries. But Colorado is an extremely good team as well. So that's just going to be a huge matchup. Then on Friday the 3rd, we have Washington versus Carolina. That obviously they met in the playoffs last year. They play in the same division. Carolina, a wild card team at this point, needs points. Washington, the best team in the division, should be a great matchup. And finally, Saturday the 4th, we've got Winnipeg versus Minnesota in a very important Central Division showdown again. Again, a lot of division games this week, which is absolutely awesome. And that's why this board is so full with this many games, because there are just some huge games this week. Minnesota trying to stay alive in the playoff race. I don't think they're a playoff team, but a win over a team like Winnipeg would certainly help their case. Florida versus Buffalo. Again, Atlantic Division, as I've said, for all the Atlantic Division matchups, huge points on the line. And then the New York Islanders versus Toronto. That's just 2 of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. The Islanders, 2nd place in the Metro. Toronto, 2nd place in the Atlantic. Just 2 very good teams going at it there. So, huge week in the NHL. A ton of great games to watch this week. I hope you guys get the chance to see some of those games. I know I will be watching as many as I can. Also, we turn to 2020 this week. The new year, second half of the season will be starting. This is a big week for the NHL. So some really great games this week. Hope you guys get the chance to watch some of them, and it should be a fun week. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All the links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.